Welcome to American Indian and Alaska Native Living, a program designed to educate and inspire listeners throughout Indian country. American Indian and Alaska Native Living is hosted by Dr. David DeRose, a board-certified specialist in both internal medicine and preventive medicine. Dr. DeRose has a wide range of experience with Native health issues, and he is here today to help you learn more about your health. Here is Dr. DeRose.
Welcome to American Indian and Alaska Native Living. I'm Dr. David DeRose. We're recording another show from the venue of ASI 2025 in Orlando, Florida. I have just been so excited about the wonderful guests that we've had here. If you've never been to an ASI conference, they have breakout sessions and all kinds of opportunities to network with people who are making a difference in Indian country, in health circles, education circles. And across from me is someone who kind of bridges all those areas, Dr. Roger Seheult. Roger, it's so great to have you with us.
Thanks so much, Dave.
Roger, you are all over the internet. I continue to see things that you're putting out. You're putting out content regularly. Your faculty at both Loma University and the University of California at Riverside. You've got an impressive list of credentials, too. So you're a medical doctor, but you've got, actually, is it 3 specializations?
4.
4. Okay, thanks for correcting me. So what are those in?
Internal medicine, which is kind of obligatory, and then pulmonary, and then critical care, and that extra one in sleep, which actually feeds a lot into what we'd like to talk of today in terms of sunlight and circadian rhythm.
I love this topic, and folks throughout Indian country have lived historically very close to the land. They've recognized the power that is in nature. And it seems like, well, until relatively recently, it seems that people wanted to isolate themselves from nature. They want to be in controlled environments. Even if they taught powerful lifestyle principles like exercise, they would want to exercise in a gym in this controlled environment. But you've been doing literature research, you've been seeing things in your clinical practice as well as things that you've been teaching about the power of outdoor activity, sunlight, getting out into nature. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in this field.
Yeah, this is an emerging field. Now, we've known for a long time that the circadian rhythm, which is the clock that governs what happens in our body, is affected by light. To get an idea about how powerful that can be, there's an analogy that I like to use. I had a friend that used to work at Disneyland, and he would go in at night with a large crew and would clean the park. He would notice that they were doing all sorts of things, shutting down the rides. The engineers would come in. The gift shops would be changed out, and the cash registers. There was a whole production of things that would happen only at night. And the purpose of this was to make sure that the park was ready to open brand new, as it were, at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So our bodies are far more complicated than Disneyland, and there are processes in our body that really need to take place, and there are signals to our body about when those things should happen. And before, in the old days, before we had technology, the human race, would have no light coming into their eyes after the sunset, and it would not be beneficial to eat at that time. But today, because of technology, because of our ability to do whatever it is that we want to do, we are doing those things.
It's amazing. Some years ago, I was doing a series of health programs in Manhattan, New York City, and we'd finish our programs at 9:30, and people are waiting in line to go into restaurants at that hour a day.
Yeah.
And I know that's not unique to New York City.
No.
What you're telling us is hormonally, metabolically, there's some real problems with that kind of behavior. Why is that so deleterious?
Well, the reason why it doesn't work so well is because these things of eating and these things of exposing your eyes to lights are going to change that circadian rhythm. Again, going back to our analogy, imagine if the gardeners all of a sudden showed up in the middle of the day at It's a Small World, that ride at Disneyland. It wouldn't look very good. Or if the engineer shut down It's a Small World or Space Mountain during the middle of the day. So things that are happening during the night that should be happening during the day or vice versa is not going to give us the optimal health that we're going to need to have. Now, this has actually been known for quite some time. We know that whether our ability to sleep at night and operate during the day is based on the circadian rhythm operating flawlessly and doing very well. What has come about probably in the last 5 years, and even specifically in the last just few weeks, there's been papers that have been published that show us that light is not just important for us to govern our circadian rhythm, but that actually sunlight itself is very important and extremely important for giving us good health in terms of longevity, in terms of cardiovascular health and in terms of immunity. And this is something that I would say 95% of healthcare providers have no idea or understanding about.
So let's just step back a little bit and make sure we're all on the same page. We've been using this term circadian.
Yeah.
The roots of that circa about DN day, have I got that origin right? So
Yep.
these
absolutely.
roughly 24-hour rhythms.
Yes.
I know some of the early work featured people in isolated environments like caves. Is that some ancient history for you or something that you've delved into?
Yeah, that is something that's part of it. You see, what happens is that the clock in our head constantly needs the little arm to be adjusted on a day-to-day basis, because it's not exactly a 24-hour clock. It's, as you mentioned, circadian, meaning about a day. And in most cases, it runs a little bit longer than a day. So these people that were living in caves were actually cycling through and not actually having their clock run on a daily basis, and would actually run long and then catch up once again. So it was kind of like a free running clock. And that showed us the fact that the circadian clock in the brain is not running on a 24-hour period. So normally there would have to be some sort of external pressure or something coming from the outside. The term that we use for that is an old German term called Zeitgeber, a Zeitgeber that would actually affect our circadian clock. Think of a Zeitgeber as pulling out the arm from the back of a clock and adjusting the clock for a few minutes and then pushing it back in. And for us, for human beings, the most powerful Zeitgeber is actually light. So if light is coming into your body during the day, that's going to solidify, it's going to emphasize the fact that your circadian rhythm is running correctly. If, on the other hand, you're getting light coming into the eye during a time when there should not be light coming in at night, this is going to confuse your circadian rhythm, and it's going to try to correct that either by shifting too early or too late.
So a lot of our listeners are not students of the German language.
Yeah.
I did have a chance to study a bit of German, so Zeitgeber, time giver, and basically synchronizing that 24-hour cycle. So if I'm getting up, getting outside, especially in the sunlight,
Yes.
that's going to help my body clock be on that 24-hour cycle in sync with everything else around me.
Correct.
Why is that so important when it comes to health?
Well, because there are so many proteins in the body, so many enzymes in the body that are involved with metabolism, that are involved with immunity. Let me give you an example of a study that they did once. They took students at a university and they subjected them to what we call an all-nighter. A lot of times students don't study, and they got to pull an all-nighter right before the examination.
We're following along here.
And they tracked over 100 different enzymes. And these were enzymes that were involved, as I said, in cardiovascular health, metabolism, immunity, and many of those were disrupted. And these are, again, enzymes that are involved with very important functions of the human body. So we could extrapolate that if you're doing this on a regular basis, these enzymes that should be going up when they need to be going up, and others that need to be going down when they need to be going down, are going to be out of whack and not going to be doing the optimal thing. So again, going back to our analogy of Disneyland, the park is not going to be open and beautiful with all of the gum on the floor. It's lifted up like what's supposed to be done at night. It's going to look haphazard, and frankly, that's how a lot of people feel today when they get up in the morning. They feel haphazard.
One of the consistent things that my patients have told me is if they have arthritis and they cut themselves short on sleep, they often have more joint pain. Is there some physiologic basis for that? Are some of these compounds involved with inflammation affected by this circadian rhythm?
Oh, absolutely. And I can endorse that as well. I remember my wife, we got married right after we became physicians. And of course, at that time of life, you have to do a lot of residency. You're up doing a lot of call. And she told me, she's like, Roger, I know what somebody with fibromyalgia feels like because I have exactly those same feelings. When you go for a long time without sleep, it seems like everything hurts. And you're right. There is actually a physiological basis for this. There are receptors, pain receptors. All of these things get amplified when you're not getting enough sleep.
I know you have looked a lot at the immune system, a lot of interest in your channel during the COVID crisis, and you were looking at how lifestyle impacted infectious diseases. How critical is sleep in that whole equation?
Oh, absolutely critical. There was a study out of University of Pittsburgh, I believe it was, where they took people, it's a very simple experiment. They were going to give them the flu shot, and they were measuring how much the antibody response was for that. And people who had very poor quality of sleep had a certain amount of antibody after vaccination. After someone got at least 7 to 9 hours of sleep with 95% sleep efficiency, the antibody response was nearly twice that from the flu vaccine than those that were not getting. So just on a very simple, superficial basis on just the antibody response, we can see there a twofold difference in those that are getting good sleep and not getting good sleep.
So even if someone might be tuning in and saying, hey, I'm not into vaccinations, but you're talking about the immune system. If they get exposed to the influenza virus, it's going to be the same thing, right?
Correct.
So we've got to talk about this whole aspect of sunshine because, well, in a lot of circles, people think sunlight is something you should avoid. It's a risk factor for skin cancer.
Yeah.
Is all that true?
That's a very good question. That's all being actually rethought. In fact, there is an article that was published by Dr. Richard Weller. He's a dermatologist at the University of Edinburgh. And he published a paper in a very prestigious journal called the Journal of Investigative Dermatology. And the title of his op-ed is Sunlight, Time for a Rethink. And it's on this very topic that we're talking about. We're looking at the benefits of sunlight. And what we're actually starting to look at is what is the evidence that sunlight causes melanoma or some of these other skin cancers. And in this paper that he published, it was actually a UK biobank study of over 300,000, very large study. He showed that people who were outside in the light, as evidenced by shortwave radiation from the sun, or in solariums. In England, they have these buildings, part of houses, which are basically glass. They're almost look like a greenhouse. And people who frequently go into these solariums, they were able to track all of this. And he found that in almost every single situation, the cardiovascular disease, total mortality, cardiovascular mortality, and non-cardiovascular, non-cancer mortalities, all of them dropped with sunlight exposure. But the big question was, what happened to melanoma? So in that study, he showed that melanoma incidence did go up slightly, but it was not statistically significant. And what that means, to unpack that, is we don't know if that increase was due to chance or whether it was a real increase. Now, when they looked at melanoma mortality, there was not even an increase numerically or statistically at all. So the conclusion of that study was sunlight reduces all-cause mortality, and it does not increase melanoma mortality. It may increase melanoma incidence, but we don't know if that number was by chance. So because of that, and because of a number of other studies that have come before that, a number of dermatological societies in Australia, of all places, where they have a high UV index, are now starting to recognize that there is benefit to getting out into the sun, and they need to mitigate their understanding of what people ought to be doing in terms of public health behavior.
This is a fascinating topic. You know, we've been speaking about some of these scientific terms that you and I throw back and forth. So incidence is the number of new cases of a condition. Melanoma, of course, an especially deadly skin cancer that can spread through the blood, unlike many of the other skin cancers that seem to spread locally. Have they looked at those other cancers, the so-called squamous cell and basal cell skin cancers?
They have previously, but not in that particular study. And what they've seen is that there may or may not be somewhat of a small increase. Here's the issue. The issue is that we have pretty good evidence that ultraviolet light by itself in a petri dish can cause mutations. We have that pretty clearly. What we don't have evidence of very clearly is when ultraviolet light is in the presence of the rest of the spectrum from the sun on a human being in that type of a situation, whether that causes an increase in these type of skin cancers. In other words, there could be another factor circulating through the body that makes someone more susceptible to getting these cancers, and it may not just be ultraviolet.
This is really amazing stuff. What I hear you saying, Dr. Seheult, is one thing that's clear, is sunshine is beneficial for a host of functions in the body, helping prevent a host of diseases, helping to help you live longer, right?
Yeah.
And don't neglect sunshine because of maybe an undue fear of skin cancer.
Yeah, I think all things in moderation. So 15, 20 minutes is what we're talking about.
Okay, we have to step away just briefly. I'm Dr. David DeRose, my guest, Dr. Roger Seheult, the show American Indian and Alaska Native Living. We've got more coming up, great stuff with Dr. Roger Seheult. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Today's broadcast has been pre-recorded. However, if you have questions about today's show or would like further information, please reach out to us on the web at aianl.org. That stands for American Indian Alaska Native Living. Again, aianl.org. Or you can call us at 1-800-775-HOPE. That's 1-800-775-4673. We'll be right back after this.
Social Security is with you through life's journey from birth to retirement. As your life changes year to year, so do your needs. For over 80 years, Social Security has helped to meet your needs and is committed to improving access to the services that make a difference in your life. Today, you can verify your earnings, estimate your future benefits, apply for retirement, manage your benefits, and even change your address, all from the comfort of your home. Social Security's online services help put you in control with secure access to your information anytime, anywhere, allowing you to spend more time with family, friends, or simply just enjoying the day. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow. See what you can do online at socialsecurity.gov.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
You're listening to Dr. David DeRose on American Indian and Alaska Native Living. Your comments and questions are welcome. Call now at 1-800-775-HOPE. That's 1-800-775-4673. Here again is Dr. DeRose.
Welcome back to American Indian and Alaska Native Living. Dr. David DeRose with my guest, Dr. Roger Seheult. Many of you know Dr. Seheult's name. Roger, I know in medical circles, your name is synonymous with something that may sound strange to folks that aren't physicians, but it's called med-cram.
Yeah.
I think most students know what cramming is. Where did this name come from, and what are you doing with med-cram?
Guilty as charged. I'm the one that came up with the name, although a student of mine came up with the idea, and actually he's my partner at MedCram. He said, look, Dr. Seheult, people don't study the same way that you used to study. People don't go to the library and check out books. What we do is we go to YouTube and we find the shortest video on that topic, and then we watch it. So he actually came up with the idea of us trying to actually get a channel started where we could actually put videos on so students could learn, and I could explain clearly about some of these topics. I thought it was a great idea because every month students would come to our rotation, and this way I could record the topic once and then assign the homework.
That's great. So you've been teaching students for years, right?
Yeah, we started this in 2012. It's been out and it's grown. It really took off during COVID when a lot more students, everyday people, wanted to learn more about what was going on.
Folks often measure the reach of a channel and number of subscribers. Are we talking a few hundred? You know, it's kind of esoteric stuff. What numbers are we at?
Well, we're up to about 1.6 million.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So a lot of folks know you. They've been relying on you in the medical community to kind of walk them through practical things. I know you're keeping on the cutting edge of stuff because I keep seeing posts from you, new videos that you're releasing. One of them that caught my attention that deals with the topic that we're discussing was about infrared radiation. And that is not a household term. I don't remember growing up my folks ever told us about infrared radiation. Tell us about your interest in this and why it's important.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I became acutely aware of just as a critical care physician, and why my patients, during COVID especially, were coming into the hospital and not getting better, even though we were giving them vitamin D. Now, vitamin D is produced by the sun, but it's from ultraviolet, not infrared. And I began to think, perhaps this was more, vitamin D was a marker of what they were doing. See, when people go out into the sun, they're getting all of the rays of the sun, ultraviolet, infrared, and visible.
This is a fascinating topic because there's so many connections that we see in medicine. Sometimes something will be measured and they'll say, I remember one of the classic studies with cancer. They looked at smokers, and the ones who had higher beta-carotene levels had lower cancer rates. But when they went ahead and gave them the beta-carotene, what happened?
They were actually worse. In fact, they had to stop the study because they noticed it was so much worse. That's absolutely correct. That's the classic example.
And the bottom line is, the explanation I've heard is, the beta-carotene was a marker for the fruit and vegetable consumption they were eating. You think that's the best explanation?
I think so. The other aspect of it is sometimes scientists fall into this fallacy called scientific reductionism, where we see that somebody eats a particular fruit and they do better, and so we think that whatever's in that fruit must be the reason, and so we try to isolate it, find it, patent it, produce it, and give it in high doses. And obviously, in this case, it didn't work at all.
So we're using this as an analogy for sunlight.
Yeah.
So folks are measuring vitamin D levels, and they say there's this correlation between higher vitamin D levels and all kinds of good things.
Yeah.
But you're saying when it came to COVID, there's some kind of disconnect.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just COVID. It's everything. Yeah. If you start to step back and look, if you look at a graph that graphs the deaths on a particular day of the year for heart disease, respiratory disease, kidney, diabetes, the list goes on and on, you will see a pattern emerge that shows that the most amount of deaths is about 1 to 3 weeks after the shortest day of the year, and the least amount of deaths is about 1 to 3 weeks after the longest day of the year. And by the way, it's exactly the same in the southern hemisphere, except instead of the highest being in December, January, the highest is in June and July. So that really got me to start to think about this. And anyway, looking at over all of this data, and then leading up to about 2 weeks ago, there was a major paper that was dropped that I believe seals the deal. So this study that was actually published was published in Nature Scientific Reports, very prestigious journal. It was done by Glenn Jeffrey, who is a professor in the Department of Ophthalmology at University College London. And this is what he did. He took people outside, and he was able to measure the spectrum of light that was going into them. And then on the backside, he was able to measure the sunlight that was coming out the other side. Now, that may sound mind-blowing, but he was able to have a very sensitive detector, and he was able to see which wavelengths of the sun was best able to penetrate through the body. And the best wavelength was about 850 nanometers, which is a measurement of the wavelength which puts it outside of the visible spectrum. It's in the infrared spectrum. So let me just rephrase this. We can see what's coming into the body. We can see what's coming out the other side. What he did was he took the wavelength that seemed to penetrate the best, took these people inside, gave them just that wavelength, and he saw what happened to them. And what he found was that there was an improvement in metabolic health, even in areas of the body that were not in the direct path of this light.
So it had some kind of systemic effect.
Exactly.
So infrared and heat, some people think are synonymous. Can you help us understand that?
So infrared light can come from heat, and infrared light can feel like heat, but they're very different. Heat is a random increase in molecular patterns or molecular motion, and by itself is not infrared. Infrared light is a very well-organized path of light that comes to your body. Infrared light is very able, because of its long wavelength, to penetrate through clothes very easily. It can penetrate through the skin, as we just mentioned, and it interacts with your heat receptors in your body. So, for instance, if you were to go outside on a sunny day and close your eyes, you could literally feel what side of the body the sun was touching because of all of those properties.
Even if you're totally blindfolded.
Correct.
So infrared has these unique benefits. Most glass will not let ultraviolet through, correct?
Correct.
But it will let infrared through? Is that true or not?
It depends on the glass.
Okay.
If it's glass before 1960 or 70, the chances are that it's going to let most of the infrared light through. However, because of new technology and new laws, especially in states where it's very warm, they will, by law, require something called low-E glass be installed so that the light coming through will not heat up the interior of the home and cause increased costs in cooling. So the way to tell whether or not your glass is that is, you might be able to read the small print on the glass itself, or if you simply stand in front of the glass when the sun is coming in, if you can feel the warmth of that sun, the chances are that it's not a low-E glass. If you can't, it probably is.
Interesting. So why should I be prioritizing more infrared?
Well, I believe that the infrared light, and I think the data shows through multiple studies that infrared light, we have studies that show on a petri dish that infrared light upregulates certain metabolism and downregulates inflammation. We know on a human-by-human basis, we have human trials where patients with COVID received infrared light. They actually were discharged from the hospital sooner. We have these kind of studies that Glenn Jeffrey has done where metabolism is improved, ATP production or energy production in the little batteries in our cells called mitochondria improves. And this type of light is increasingly more and more only found outside. The LED bulbs that we install in our homes do not have infrared light. The windows, the new windows that we have, does not have infrared light. And so when we, as Americans, spend 93% of our time inside of our homes, that type of lack of infrared light has been described by a number of scientists that I am well familiar with as the scurvy of the 21st century. So just as 300 years ago on British ships. They had scurvy where their diet was very poor in vitamin C. They found out very quickly that if they were to supplement their diet with lemons or limes, that they would be able to get enough vitamin C to ameliorate that scurvy. What I'm seeing now in the 21st century is that our lives, because of technology, because of upward mobility, because of money, because of the fact that we want to be not hot or cold, we're finding ourselves more and more in environments where there's very little infrared lights. And so just adding red panels or this or that may actually show a benefit. I think the real benefit is to get outside.
Okay. We talked as we began about circadian rhythms. We talked about this concept of Zeitgebers, time givers, how the sun can synchronize our clocks. I've always understood that one of those critical times to get out if you're trying to synchronize the clock is early in the morning, maybe around the time the sun is coming up. But that begs some other questions. If you're getting out early, you're not likely getting any efficient ultraviolet light. What about infrared? Where does that fit in? Do you have to get out at a certain time of day?
No, that's the good news, is that if you can see the sun and if you can see light from the sun, you are seeing light from the sun that is less able to penetrate than infrared is. The moral of the story here is that if you can see the sun and the light coming from it, you're getting plenty of infrared light.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. Where I live in Southern California, it snows because I live a little bit up in the mountains. So I did this experiment. As the sun was setting, the temperature was near freezing. Yet, while the sun was hitting the snow, I could see drops of water coming off. As soon as the sun set and it lost that, even though the temperature itself did not change, the water stopped immediately. In other words, what was melting the snow was not the temperature. It was the light from the sun, the infrared light from the sun that was melting the snow.
We don't have a lot of time in this segment. We're going to talk more, but someone is listening with diabetes. You've been talking about metabolism and how infrared affects it, how infrared has these metabolic enhancing effects. Something like diabetes, any evidence that might be helped by infrared exposure?
Absolutely. So Glenn Jeffrey once again exposed red light at 670 nanometers after healthy people were given a glucose tolerance test. And those that had the light shining on their backs without their knowledge had a 27% reduction in glucose compared to those that did not have red light.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you want better diabetic control, you got to get outside.
Exactly.
So this old idea of taking a walk outside after a meal, if you have diabetes, is really prudent. Huh?
Not only, so when you get outside, you're more likely to have exercise and you're more likely to have fresh air and also sunlight.
Wow. Dr. Seheult, we got to talk more about this. This is cutting edge stuff and it's simple to get, right?
Yep.
We got to step away, though, just for a minute. Dr. David DeRose with my guest, Dr. Roger Seheult. You're listening to American Indian and Alaska Native Living. Second half of our show is coming up right after these announcements. Stay by with us.
You're listening to Dr. David DeRose on American Indian and Alaska Native Living. Your comments and questions are welcome. Call now at 1-800-775-HOPE. That's 1-800-775-4673. Here again is Dr. DeRose.
Welcome back to the second half of today's edition of American Indian and Alaska Native Living. We're talking about some things that, well, First Nation peoples have had in abundance living in their indigenous settings. We're talking about sunlight and infrared radiation. We're talking about all the health-enhancing benefits that come from our environment with Dr. Roger Seheult. Roger, we want to move beyond the sun to some of the things that the sun helps to feed, like all this plant life.
Yeah, so this is part of the benefits of getting outside, right? So getting outside, you're more likely to exercise, you're more likely to get fresh air, and we'll talk a little bit more about the air that we breathe, but plants, trees, not just the trees that we have in the spring and the summer, but also evergreens, even those types of trees. They are highly reflective of the type of light that we were just talking about, infrared light. In fact, when scientists want to see whether or not the Amazon jungle is either getting bigger or smaller, they measure that by seeing the infrared light that's reflected back to the satellites. That's how they actually measure it. So if you're outside and the sun is coming down and you feel like you're getting enough of that infrared light, that could be even enhanced even more by being in an environment where there is a lot of green trees and green spaces. Let's call it that, green spaces. We've known for decades that people who live in green spaces have lower total mortality, have lower risks of diabetes, and have lower cardiovascular death. And for many years, we debated why that was the reason. Some people have said, well, it could be because that people who live in green spaces have more money, or they're more upwardly mobile, the socioeconomic status. I think what's putting a stake in the heart of that argument and saying that actually there's something about the trees themselves is a recent program called the Green Heart Louisville program. Now, this is an amazing thing that they did. They went out to South Louisville, Kentucky, in a 4 square mile area in the downtown area, and they measured 745 subjects, their HSCRP. Now, what is HSCRP? It's highly sensitive C-reactive protein, which is a surrogate marker for inflammation. And this can affect things like heart attacks and strokes and things of that nature. So they measured 745 people. Then the next thing that they did, from about 2019 to 2022, they did something remarkable. They went out, purchased, and planted 8,000 mature trees in the ground in a 4 square mile area. That completely changed the landscape of that area. Then after about those 3 years, they went back and they found the same 745 people and measured their highly sensitive CRP levels. They had dropped by 13 to 20%, which correlates to about a drop of 10 to 15% stroke rates. And they did not do an exercise plan for them. They did not give them guaranteed income. They made sure that all of those things were the same. So either it was the infrared light coming from those trees, or as we can talk about, maybe these trees themselves were giving off factors that was improving it. And that talks about the fresh air that we can talk about. So I used to think that fresh air was the lack of any pollutants, just pure oxygen, pure nitrogen. That would be the best air possible. It's actually not. And this kind of blew my mind, Dave, when I saw this, because I started to realize that just like we have a micro gut flora, gut microflora, there's also something called a respiratory flora. So these are beneficial bacteria that actually prevent infections, and they are floating in the air. They're actually beneficial for us. The other thing is actually these chemicals that come off of trees as well.
So some of this is difficult to piece together. We're trusting you. You're a pulmonary specialist. You know about the lungs, but I think some folks are saying, well, how do these dots all connect? But I want to come back to this concept of infrared and trees, because I tend to think if something is reflecting something, that is depriving you of it. You know, I'm going to get something away from me. I'm going to put an umbrella up, and that will divert the rain away from me. So you're using this term, trees reflecting infrared. How does that help me get more benefit?
Imagine going out into a garden and taking a photograph in the infrared spectrum, meaning that light coming into the camera is going to be shown if it's in the infrared spectrum. If anybody listening to this goes to Google and types in infrared photography into Google and hits images, you will see it will be impressive, because you will see a garden and trees, and it looks as though the leaves on the trees are coated with snow. The amount of light coming from those trees is phenomenal. So imagine if you are someone that maybe doesn't react well to sunlight, but you want to get the benefits of what we're talking about today. Simply going out into a garden and sitting under a tree, but being surrounded by trees around you. You're not going to get direct sunlight on your body itself, but you're going to be getting plenty of infrared from the trees that are reflecting the sun in your direction.
That is really an amazing concept, because you would think that you've got to be, unobstructed pathway to the sun, but the trees are actually allowing some of these rays to pass through the leaves, as well as actually...
They're reflecting off of the leaves that are adjacent to the tree that you're under, and then they're coming into you. So realize that they don't reflect ultraviolet light. So if you're interested in getting vitamin D and ultraviolet light, which does have some benefits, you're not going to get much of that under a tree. You're walking outside in a garden, however, unobstructed, you're going to be getting all sorts of light, ultraviolet, visible light, and infrared light.
We've got to come back now to other things that the trees do for us. And we're talking about the scuba diver not getting the ideal gas mix in their tanks, even though they've got oxygen and nitrogen, right?
Yes.
But there's other compounds. You were talking about microbes. Some people would use the term germs kind of loosely to refer to that. But there's other compounds, too, that trees can produce, correct?
Absolutely. These are known as phytoncides. And the Japanese have done extensive research on this. I really have to hand it to them. They took a number of CEOs from Tokyo, took them up to their famous Hinoki cypress forests in the tops of the mountains, And they did studies on them. They took blood samples, they had them go out into nature, they had them walk around, and they found marked changes in the natural killer cells, which are cells in the immune system, and also the granules inside of these cells that do the killing of these foreign things that are not supposed to be growing in your body. And they found that these things were enhanced up to a week later, even up to a month in some cases. And so really, this type of getting out into nature, getting amongst trees, not just Hinoki cypress trees, but any tree, will do this once a week, on a weekly basis. If you were to take a break for a week and be able to get out in that type of an environment, you would find that you could have a benefit from an immune standpoint just walking out in nature and in these trees.
Wow. Is there a, sometimes in medicine we talk about a dose response effect. If you get more, you get more benefit. Is that true with this kind of stuff? If I check my box, I did 30 minutes once a week. What is the amount? Do we know?
That's a good question. In terms of sunlight, we actually do have some data. Glenn Jeffrey, again, from UCL in England, has seen in multiple species, whether it's fireflies, mosquitoes, or bees, or humans, that about 15 minutes of infrared light is what it takes to turn on the system. And that further stimulation doesn't really give you that much more.
Wow.
Now, in terms of the phytoncides from trees, I don't think we've done a dose response curve there, but these CEOs from Tokyo that they took up there were walking around probably for about half a day. It probably could be much less. Interestingly, they took these CEOs back down to Tokyo, put them in a hotel room, and infused these essential oils into the hotel room. They got many of the same effects that they did when they were walking in the forest, except their urine was not low in cortisol like it was in the actual forest. So these people were still a little bit more stressed in the hotel room than they would have been up walking in nature.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So we're talking about far-reaching benefits from things that, in a sense, don't cost you a penny. Now, true, you may need to drive somewhere if you're in the middle of a big urban center. What else do we need to have on the equation when we're looking at the benefits of nature?
Yeah. I do believe that fresh air, as we've talked about, is very important. I do believe that sunlight is very important, and avoiding sunlight or any type of light after the sun goes down. I think exercise is one of those big areas that I think people are afraid of because of what they see on the media. When they think of exercise, they think of, these gyms. They think of they've got to go there and they've got to look like the people in the commercials.
Fair enough.
And they're like, I can never do that. But actually the data shows that most of the benefit is actually in moderate exercise and not in heavy exercise.
There's some interesting literature dealing with noise exposure as we speak of environment. As a sleep specialist, is this a concern to you?
Yeah. There's many reasons why people may not be able to get good sleep. Sometimes there's artificial light pollution. Noise is certainly one of those things. And I can identify with that. Where I used to live, it was next to a train crossing.
Okay.
And when I first moved in there, I thought I'd made a mistake buying the house because every single train crossing woke me up at night. But it's interesting. Right before I moved, and I stayed there for about 9 years, it didn't bother me as much. I got used to it. I don't know if it was still affecting my sleep, but I adapted to it. And I'm sure we adapt to a lot of things that probably still affect us, but we don't realize it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's been one of the fascinating things with high blood pressure, some of the research on noise. And it never was on my radar screen until I started looking at it. But it does seem like although our brain may get used to it, I was kind of wondering if, in a sleep lab, you're not necessarily having a lot of ambient noise. But I have wondered if there's arousal at a brain level, even though you're thinking that you're sleeping through it.
Oh, well, we know that happens, absolutely. Whether that happened during noise, I don't know offhand. I'm sure it does. But there are so many things that can cause arousals that we can see on the EEG monitor, where we monitor the brainwaves, where patients will never have a recollection. Absolutely.
We've had a number of guests here in this venue talking about lifestyle factors. One of them was talking about timing for sleep. And you gave us that beautiful analogy of Disney and when they need to do their cleaning work. They actually have a night shift that shows up at a certain time. Is there a certain time of day that we should be getting to bed? Is there a magic hour? Or how do you instruct your patients when it comes to that?
It's trying to figure out exactly where their clock is. So how do scientists and researchers do it? It's not very nice. The gold standard for figuring out someone's circadian rhythm is figuring out when their core body temperature is the lowest. And that usually is about 4 o'clock in the morning, generally speaking. If it's not, then we know how far off they are. I won't tell you how we figure out exactly how their core body temperature is
Fair
the coolest.
enough. Fair enough.
It's not very nice, but it's amazing what college students will do.
Okay. Okay. Well, especially when you offer them some cash.
Exactly.
Okay, we're following along here. So you find out when their core temperature is the lowest.
Yeah.
And then what does that help you with as far as, can you say, oh, your core temperature was lowest at 4 a.m., you should be in bed by X time?
Exactly. So what we do, if it's at 4 o'clock in the morning, generally speaking, people should be getting sleepy at about 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, generally. Where we are in modern medicine is we don't come down and say to people that this is the time that you need to go to bed. We look and see where their circadian rhythm is, and if they have a social issue with it, or if they have a problem with it, and they're coming to seek help, that's when we try to fix it. Now, we probably should be more proactive than just that, but examples that I would say is, for instance, say that you have a married couple, and one can't fall asleep until 1 o'clock in the morning, and the other one's falling asleep at 9 o'clock at night, and it's causing friction. Then we would step in there and try to say, okay, how can we get the person who's falling asleep at 1 earlier, or the one who's sleeping at, falling asleep early a little bit later, or both? And the key to doing that is figuring out what the circadian rhythm is doing. Is it late? Is it early? And then using very well-known and validated procedures to move that circadian rhythm.
We've been talking about light exposure. We're talking about circadian rhythms. And we have to step away just briefly. But when we come back, I know one of the things that I often hear from people that have to do international travel or even travel throughout the U.S. is, how do I deal with jet lag? And I've heard that there's some really powerful insights that have to do with light. I'm really interested in your take on that. We're going to step away, though, just for a minute. I'm Dr. David DeRose, my guest, Dr. Roger Seheult. We're talking about things that can make a dramatic difference in your life with simple things like getting out in nature more, getting sunshine, infrared. We've got more coming up, how you can deal with jet lag. I'm Dr. DeRose. Stay by. We'll be right back after these messages.
Today's broadcast has been pre-recorded. However, if you have questions about today's show or would like further information, please call 1-800-775-HOPE. That's 1-800-775-4673. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to Dr. David DeRose on American Indian and Alaska Native Living. Your comments and questions are welcome. Call now at 1-800-775-HOPE. That's 1-800-775-4673. Here again is Dr. DeRose.
Welcome back for our final segment of today's edition of American Indian and Alaska Native Living. Dr. David DeRose with Dr. Roger Seheult. Dr. Seheult, if you haven't already met him prior to today's show, is someone who is well known throughout the internet. YouTube channel, you were sharing with us well over 1 million subscribers. Someone says, well, I still haven't heard of this guy. And in fact, maybe they don't even know how to pronounce your name. If they're trying to look you up, how do you spell Seheult?
So it's S as in Sam, E as in elephant, H, E as in elephant, U, L, T as in Tom.
So now if I just looked at it on paper, it looks like Seheult or something.
Yep, that's exactly how it looks.
So S-E-H-E-U-L-T?
Correct.
Okay. Someone can put that into YouTube. There's probably not a lot of Dr. Seheults.
No.
Okay. How else can they find you?
They could go to MedCram. That's M-E-D, like medicine, and then cram, like you're cramming for a test. Although we actually explain things very clearly. That's one of the things that we do.
So MedCram is the YouTube channel?
Correct.
Medcram.com is the website?
Correct. And then on that website, for people who are healthcare professionals, we have videos that are accredited that you can take and get accreditation through your medical accreditation board.
So if I need my continuing medical education, MedCram could be my one-stop shop?
Absolutely.
Okay. So thanks for making sure I know where to get this great information. So, Roger, we were speaking about this challenge of jet lag.
Yeah.
And you have intimated during our breaks that you've got some really practical strategies for that.
Absolutely. So the problem with jet lag is that you're going from one part of the globe to another part very quickly. And if you remember, we talked about earlier that our circadian rhythm is actually longer than a day. So it's actually very easy. And people don't have a lot of issues with jet lag when they go from the east to the west. The problem is when they go from the west to the east. That's where the most problem is.
Okay.
So let's take the example of, for instance, you're going from Los Angeles to London.
Okay.
Or Paris, whatever one. The issue is that your body has gone from Los Angeles to Paris, but your circadian rhythm is still in Los Angeles. And because Paris or London is 8 hours, 9 hours ahead, you're going to have to get your circadian rhythm to advance itself 9 hours or 8 hours, which can be very difficult. So the way to do that is by knowing that your circadian rhythm is still back in Los Angeles and knowing the times of day that you should be experiencing bright light and when you should not be experiencing bright light. And also taking melatonin. So melatonin is a hormone in your brain that is secreted right before you go to bed that helps speed up and get you ready for bed. But you can also take melatonin, not the extended release, but the immediate release form to sort of double up on that, especially in the short run running up to a trip. So what I like to do, if you're going 8 hours from San Francisco or Los Angeles to London, and by the way, they actually did a randomized controlled trial on this, and it practically eliminated jet lag.
Wow.
So this protocol almost completely eliminated it. Do this. 3 days before travel, you take 5 milligrams of melatonin at 6 o'clock p.m. on the in the time zone where you're starting out. Okay.
So it doesn't matter how many time zones you're traveling.
In this case, the study was actually going from San Francisco to London.
Okay.
So that's about 8 time zones. So 6 p.m., which is far earlier than you would normally have melatonin. What it's doing is it's getting the body set up and earlier. So you'll notice that you fall asleep more early, and this is going to happen more and more as you get closer to the actual travel dates.
So 3 days before, 5 milligrams, 6 p.m.
Correct.
What about the next day?
So when you travel,
I don't do any more melatonin the next day?
On the day of travel, you do. But what you do is when you get to the final destination, you take it right before you would normally socially go to bed over there.
Oh, okay.
So it finishes up the movement of that circadian rhythm. So by the time you get there, and you do it for 4 more days, so a total of 7 days. So you do it for about a week, 3 days before you travel, 4 days after you travel, about 5 milligrams, not extended release, the immediate release formulation, and you do that. So 6 p.m., the 3 days before you leave.
So every day, 6 p.m., 6 p.m., 6 p.m.
Correct.
Okay.
And then when you get to your final destination, right before you go to bed, in the evening time when you should normally go to bed.
Okay.
And that should eliminate it completely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, let's say someone says, I can't afford melatonin. You say, how did you fly across the ocean? Or they don't have access to it.
Let me tell you what happens here. This is an important thing to know. When typically you fly from Los Angeles to London, it's going to be a red eye. So you get on the plane at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. This is what happens. You're on the plane at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it takes probably about 9 or 10 hours to get to London. So when you're flying right over the Atlantic Ocean, you're actually getting in, it's about 6:30 in the morning, local time in London, right? But it's actually only maybe about 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning where your circadian rhythm is. And so what do the flight attendants do on the plane? It's 6:30, they want to try to get you accustomized. They say, everybody lift your windows up, we're going to put all the lights on, it's time for breakfast. And so it's actually the worst thing you could possibly do. Because what you're doing is you're exposing your eyes to light, even though it's 6 o'clock in the morning, local time in London, your circadian rhythm is still back in Los Angeles. And what you're doing is you're exposing your eyes to light at 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. And the problem with that is that that's going to delay your circadian rhythm even more. So you're actually hindering. So the key point in this is, yes, do all these things to speed up your circadian rhythm. But the more important thing is to make sure that you don't do anything that's going to hinder it.
Well, so what do I do if I'm on that flight? Am I supposed to have my blindfolds and keep those on?
Well, here's what you do. You get to pretend like you're a famous movie star. And you put these dark glasses on. You have to always obey what the flight attendants tell you to do. But you don't have to necessarily get the bright light, so put dark glasses on. Pull it out, and you can have your breakfast in style.
Okay, fair enough. I'm surprised that you say pretend that I'm a famous celebrity. Okay, Dr. Seheult, our time is rapidly slipping away. I know you have such a wealth of material that deals with lifestyle. As folks have been tuning in and learning a lot, I so appreciate the things that you shared. You got a wealth of material there at medcram.com. What other things should at least be on people's radar screen? If they don't know about them, they should check out your website or learn about it. If we're looking at some simple, high-revenue items that you can put into practice that are going to really help you.
I think 2 big things. Number 1, diet and nutrition. There's a lot to be said for the type of things that we put into our body. And the evidence is showing that a whole foods plant-based diet is actually superior. The other thing that I would mention is the importance of body temperature. And that's important because what we do a lot in medicine is we treat symptoms. And a lot of people think that a fever in an acute situation is a detrimental problem or where the body is not doing the right thing. What we have seen in science, and a lot of papers have come out and been published about this, is that when the fever in a body goes up, it actually activates a lot of our immune system. Interferon levels improve. And so what I've done in my practice is when patients have a fever in the intensive care unit, unless it's going to cause some other issue, I do not treat fevers with Tylenol. I do not do that. And even more importantly, for people listening who maybe are coming down with a cold or they have fevers or chills, is to actually promote fever, either by not treating it with Tylenol, but even more importantly, the use of external ways of increasing body temperature. So hot tubs, hot immersion. There's whole cultures that do this with the sauna in Finland.
Right.
So these have been shown to be beneficial in increasing the body temperature and stimulating the production of these enzymes.
Now, there is a point when temperature gets too high. We think of brain risks and other things.
Absolutely.
Is there a certain magic number that we should be looking for when we really should do something?
Yeah, so I think core body temperature, once it gets over 103, 104, I think that's probably excessive. The good news is that there's been a number of studies that have been published looking at interferon, which is a protein that is very integral in the innate immune system. And what they found is that a simple temperature increase from 37 degrees to 38, or in Fahrenheit, that would be 98.6 to 100.4, is all that's necessary to increase this type of production. So I'm all in favor of a fever. The fever doesn't need to be that high.
If we got a child, and it seems like sometimes those kids can just raise their temperature dramatically, and we've had firsthand experience in our own family with these febrile seizures. I mean, that'll really scare a parent, even if you've got medical training. Again, are we just a simple thermometer at 103? I'm getting concerned. 104? What's that magic number?
Yeah, I would say, anything over 100. And I've never seen anyone have a problem. I'm not a pediatrician, so I don't deal with kids as much. So I'm probably more talking about adults. So I've never seen adults have a deleterious or bad outcome from a fever greater than 102, 103.
Okay.
And by that point, we should be seeing a lot of the benefits of interferon production.
Okay. Dr. Seheult, one more time. Folks have enjoyed your sharing, but they want to learn more. Maybe they're a health professional. They need continuing medical education or CEUs. Where do they go, again, to connect with you?
I would go to medcram.com, and you'll see a number of our courses and offerings on that page. Some of them are free, actually. Or if you want to see some of our more updated videos in terms of the popular issues that are going on right now, MedCram on the YouTube channel. We're also on X. We're on Facebook. We're on a number of those other channels.
Quick overview, some of the hot titles that you're getting a lot of views from on your YouTube channel.
So we're talking about light. We're talking about some of the new legislation that's actually coming down right now for LED bulbs. It's actually going to make them worse.
Whoa.
And so we're actually looking to see if we can get Congress to act, or at least the Department of Energy. We've had a number of hits on that. We've also talked about hydrotherapy, which is one of the ways that we can increase body temperature. So there's a number of hot topics that are very beneficial.
Tremendous. Dr. Seheult, I know a lot of demands on your time. I know it's a busy venue. We so appreciate you pulling away and joining us for the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. DeRose.
Continued success to you.
Thank you.
Well, that's all for today's edition of American Indian and Alaska Native Living. As always, I'm Dr. David DeRose, wishing you the very best of health.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.